The balance breakdown is back. I almost caught Harry by surprise with the audio recording there, where I forgot to tell him that we were, but we're here. The balance breakdown. Harry, Powell, Neal. We are going to break down UFC 298. We have a new featherweight champion. Ilia Topuria went in. He talked the talk and he walked the walk. A mighty impressive performance by the Georgian-born I think he's German-born Georgian representative and Spanish representative. The man is representing a lot of countries there, but mainly the focus has been on him as a star in Spain, what he can do after this fight. We'll talk about after we break down the fight in full. In the co-main event, we had Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa, obviously taking a look at Garry's fight over Geoff Neal as well, and the rest of the card also. Lots to talk about, lots to discuss. Harry, how are you before we get into the main event? Are we keeping well? Nice weekend.
We are keeping very well indeed. Yes, we are keeping very well indeed. Buoyed by what was, all in all, a pretty solid fight card.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, well, I won't go on my tirade. You bring.
What we'll do is we'll break down the card fully. We'll share our overall thoughts at the end. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, give us an old like on YouTube. Share with a friend. We take pride in what we do here in breaking down these fights. We want to give you the best analysis that we can, and no better man to do that other than my man right beside me here, Harry Powell. We're going to go straight into the main event here. The Ilia Topuria era has started. Feels like we're really going to be going on some journey with this guy after the level of performance, after everything that was said before the fight. He went in and delivered, like I said, second round KO for Ilia Topuria over Alexander Volkanovski. Let's get straight into the nuts and bolts of this, Harry. We spoke on the severe setup. We broke down this card last week. There was lots of things said, lots of questions asked. And I think, it was said at one stage, and I think I was very strong on this, is whoever could control the center of the cage was going to be the likely winner of this fight. And it did have a partial fact to play in the result in the main event here. When you're looking at these two, how they faced off, what did you see? Ilia Topuria was a focus of your Severe Spotlight this week. You can head over there and check it out on SevereMMA.com. An excellent piece breaking down the fight, waxing lyrical. Give us a taste of it, Harry. Give us a taste of what you were most impressed by Ilia Topuria on Saturday night.
So I think before we jump into Ilia Topuria, I think it's important to note that both fighters fought pretty well, to be honest. Alexander did a good job at trying to implement his game plan. I just think he got beaten by the better fighter on the night. And that's when I think we get to really, really elite level MMA. The thing that impressed me the most about Ilia Topuria is he allowed Alexander Volkanovski to play his game and then beat him there. So immediately, Topuria asked questions of Volkanovski across the three ranges, whether that was all the way on the outside, in boxing range, or in that sort of medium tier no man's land type range. Ilia, when he was on, or when he allowed Alex on the outside, he would shuffle step feint, and then he would come in with a jab or a 1-2 or whatever it was. If he was in that medium tier range, it was leg kicks and body jabs. And then when he was in boxing range, obviously it's the Ilia Topuria standard, right? Which is those big heavy right hands, the big crisp hooks, the really, really solid head movement. Now, that's not to say, obviously, that Volkanovski didn't adapt, because he did, and Ilia adapted as well. And I thought that was just unbelievably fantastic to watch as the momentum ebbed and flowed through the fight. But it felt as though, for the most part, and for me specifically, that Ilia Topuria very, very quickly realized that his footwork and his dynamic movement had Alexander Volkanovski nervous. He had Alexander Volkanovski questioning whether his own preparations, whether his own game plan was going to be sufficient in the fight. And as I watched that, regardless of the adjustments that Alexander Volkanovski made, the confidence in Topuria just rose and rose and rose and rose. And he kept catching. He kept warning Volkanovski by catching him either square on the hips or by forcing him behind that tram line, shutter stepping in and finding that right hand. And it felt, when I watched the first 30 seconds of the first round, obviously I already knew the result, but I said to myself, the writing's on the wall here. Like, the writing is on the wall. And the final point I will make is I was wrong in that I was wrong in that Volkanovski made some really beautiful adjustments and made it harder for Topuria. But then we got to Topuria making his set of adjustments and the fight was done. I was really, really, really impressed, needless to say, with Ilia Topuria.
100%. You said the writing on the wall. The first kind of oh shit moment for me wasn't even when the fight was going on. It was before the fight, when the both guys were facing off in the center of the cage, and the size of Ilia Topuria in comparison to Alex Volkanovski, I was like, oh man. And you know, maybe I took his size a little bit for granted coming into this fight, but you had mentioned you'd seen something where he was 172 pounds inside the cage before the main event kicked off, and that's colossal. That's where, you know, you can see the impact of the strikes that were happening when both of these guys exchanged. It was the early leg kick, the calf kick, early days that kind of changed the look in Alexander Volkanovski's face. And that was the first kind of alarm bell, I would imagine, that went through his head when he did clash with Ilia. And that was, as you said, on the outside. How do you battle with a guy like Alexander Volkanovski and counter his excellent jab, which he did quite well with throughout the fight? Well, you counter that by landing monstrous calf kicks there, and that's what Ilia was trying to do. Very, very crafty with his head movement to get into mid-range and get in even further into the pocket to get off his big shots as well. And what I was most impressed by really was his patience and his confidence, because he knew he had that power when he was willing and confident to let loose on that power, which he ended up being confident after round one. In early days in round two, you've seen a different pace from him coming out in round two. I was very impressed with that patience, because me going in thinking how he could be successful here early wasn't being patient, to be honest. Alexander Volkanovski, a notorious slow starter into fights. So, you know, I thought Ilia would come out, and look, I'm not saying that he come out with a super slow pace, but I would have expected him to be on the attack a little bit quicker. But in fairness, Volkanovski was reading a lot of his strikes. He was loading up quite a bit too, and didn't quite find his range until towards the end of round one. But he remained calm, he remained composed, and, you know, he found the button in round two, really. You mentioned about adjustments that both fighters made. I think, you know, Alexander Volkanovski started to up the pace a little bit more in round one. He was kind of seeing what happened. He was a guy who found his range quicker of the two fighters, to be honest. I think Ilia said that himself. You know, he said he was waiting and waiting just to feel that he found his range. I think Alexander found that jab within about 90 seconds or 2 minutes of that first round. You know, Ilia started kind of getting off some of the better strikes at the end of round one. And then, you know, both guys came out with a bigger pace and more bad intentions in round two. But it was Ilia that started and kind of pushed him back with some big shots, and he does that so well. Those big shots, why was he loading up? I was like, in the first round, I was asking, why is he loading up so much? And I was like, well, it makes sense, because it's when it started coming together and those shots started to land, what it was doing, it was driving Alexander Volkanovski past that tram line, putting his back against the cage. And that, as he said, was not a position he wanted to be in. And Alex Volkanovski said he didn't want to be in that position, because exactly what he expected to happen in that position happened. He took a couple of heavy shots. He went out. But picking apart maybe what I said there, what were some of the big major changes that you've seen both of these guys coming to adjust in this fight before it came to a finish?
So there was about 4 oscillations of momentum in the first round. I thought Ilia started very well by landing the low calf kick. So he forced Volkanovski to slowly build into the range game, right? Then when Volkanovski found the jab, Ilia obviously found it difficult to deal with the volume of the jab. And so what we saw was the shuffle step and the head movement. Initially, the head movement was a level change, as if to fake a shot, and then rising up into the pocket and landing shots there. Volkanovski then threw a head kick. He threw some body kicks. And so Ilia then adjusted again and gave the same shutter steps, but this time rolled his heads through as if a more traditional boxing style, right? Where he's rolling in, rolling out of the center line, and used that in order to find Alexander Volkanovski. Volkanovski then realized that, okay, he's able to cover distance far quicker than I am, and his footwork and his cage cutting is better than my initial circling. However, I'm landing jabs, and I'm also timing when he's coming in with just a 1-2. I'm timing my check left hook, and I'm landing it quite nicely. And so what did Ilia do? Ilia said, okay, I'm going to take a step off, and I'm going to wait for him to come to me. Volkanovski then upped the pace at the end of the first, landed some really, really nice jabs, some really nice check left hooks, landed a couple of right hands. And then in the second, I think Alexander Volkanovski thought to himself, cool, I'm going to up the pace again, and I'm going to see if I can draw these shots out of him in order for me to counter. Ilia Topuria said, cool, he's upping the pace. I'm going to up the pace as well. And I know that my reactions, my timing, and my speed, now that I have seen that I can cut the cage off, I've seen that I can land in the outer ranges, and I've seen in the initial opening round that I can shutter step into range and I can catch him. That was what gave Topuria the big confidence. I do think one thing that was slightly underplayed, obviously I've not seen it on comms, but I haven't seen it talked about online, was Volkanovski entered the clinch. And Volkanovski was landing some really nice knees in the clinch. However, as they started to separate from the clinch, and we saw this similarly with Merab and Henry, that Topuria's speed won him the exit of the clinch battle. And Topuria then said, I don't want to be in the clinch because Alex has got really good knees. He landed 3 or 4 really, really solid knees to the ribs in their first clinch exchange. But Volkanovski, I think, realized, I don't want to be in the clinch because I'm going to have to pay more attention about how I angle off of this clinch exchange because he's so quick and he can catch me on the way out. And then I think that killed some of the range that Volkanovski was probably likely to work in. But equally, I think that killed some of the way that Topuria was maybe going to take the fight down. If so, he wanted to start elements of grappling. And that's where we then saw some more decisions being made as they stripped away parts of each other's game.
Yeah, very well said. About the clinch and Volkanovski's success in the clinch, I felt that, those were very impactful strikes. A couple landed in round 1. He had a couple of early in round 2 as well. And, that's the combat and to punish, like you say, when you don't want to be in a certain position with another fighter, you punish them in that position and you make them hesitant to get back in there. And, what we were saying, Ilia was going to be most successful in the pocket there. When he did get into the pocket and Alex Volkanovski did choose to clinch, those knees were savage. Like, they were really, really effective. And it kind of maybe gave Alexander Volkanovski somewhat of a slight false sense of security in that position as well, because, we saw what happened when things got a little bit closer. The finishing sequence, the first question I asked myself, and it's a very unfair question towards Alexander Volkanovski, when you do get into that position and you are finding yourself behind the tram line, Harry, why do you not drop for a takedown in that position? Why don't you not level change in that position? Do you reckon that he was buzzed off the initial strike that did land? It was a left hook, I believe, that started it all before a big right hand. It was an exchange that backed him up and then the other exchange that finished him there. Did you think it's unfair of me maybe to ask why there was no level change there, no maybe attempt for another clincher to tie up that position rather than backing up fully and allowing Ilia onto him at that stage?
So my read for that specific scenario was by the time we had gotten to that actual exchange, one, Alex was definitely buzzed by the right hand. I also, and maybe this is wrong of me to say because there's no evidence of this, but Volkanovski had been brutally finished just 4 months ago. I am not sure that he was necessarily fully recovered mentally or physically to be going in and being put right back into a situation just like that. I also think that there was panic in Volkanovski's game prior to that situation. And when we watch Volkanovski, one of the things that we have talked about ad nauseum is his ability to make fantastic decisions under pressure. And I just don't feel like in that specific scenario, Ilia Topuria had allowed Volkanovski the time or the mental capacity to make a good decision. It felt as though the pressure had come. Volkanovski had felt like, cool, he's not going to be entering the pocket as dramatically because he knows that I will clinch there. But it was the shutter step and coming back up through the middle that gave that left hook to Ilia Topuria. Volkanovski's buzzed. He's backtracking because he knows he needs to circle off. Topuria's excellent cage cutting then forces him against the cage, and we are where we are. Like, I'm not sure that I can give Alexander Volkanovski too much. I can't get onto him too much for his specific movements. Do I think he could have done better? Absolutely. Do I think he had the ability to do better in that moment? I'm not sure he did. I'm not sure he did.
Yeah, and look at the whole factor of him, just coming back quickly after a knockout. It's unfortunate for Topuria, but something that does exist all the same. Now, I'm still of the opinion that the shot that did land on Volkanovski probably would have hurt him badly. Any which way, would it have put his lights out? Who knows? Who knows? We don't know, but it's worth something. But I think one thing that we can say is that, Volkanovski didn't look shot. He won that first round, and rightfully so, on all three judges' scorecards to me. It's just that he just got a little bit outsmarted in the second round by a guy who has confidence in his footwork and his power. And, that can happen when you're fighting such a big puncher as well.
Agreed. And I also think I don't pay too much inference into this curse of 35 thing. The thing that I do think, though, is that physicality and athleticism in MMA is a real thing. And by Volkanovski's age, where his fight IQ and his cerebral ability has been so massive and so pivotal in his performances, that when his body starts to fail him, it's actually worse for somebody like that because he is expecting his body to continue to work as fast as his mind does. And yet when you come up against somebody like Ilia Topuria, who's in his athletic prime, who has the confidence and the power and the this and the that behind him, it is very, very difficult. Now, I trust in somebody like Alexander Volkanovski to be able to go away and maybe take stock of where his body actually is and adapt and change his game because of the level of fight IQ that he has and come out and still be competitive at the elite level. But there is, I think, a reckoning that needs to happen in the Alexander Volkanovski camp.
He's been very athletic in rugby before mixed martial arts as well. And your body is going to slow down. The over 35 thing, it's like, it's just, you've been around for such a long time when you get to 35. And that's what we have had with Volkanovski and a lot of other fighters. I mean, it's a lot more forgiven maybe as the weight classes move up, but definitely at those lower weight classes, it seems to be a young man's game. And, there is talks of the rematch. Do you think that the rematch is the right thing to do? Do you think Volkanovski has a chance in the rematch? What do you feel that he needs to change? You're shaking your head when I'm talking about this rematch. I think before I hand it over to you, what I think is that Volkanovski almost needs a year off. I think he needs a full year off. He needs to get his body right, his mind right, and he needs to give his brain a rest. He's been super active as a champion. He's not going to go back in there in 6 months and have a different result, in my opinion. I think he needs to give him his brain the full time to recover after 2 fairly significant knockouts, and especially with that one as well, where he was separated from his senses, Harry.
So I think that on merit, I completely understand 5 title defenses, the champion that he has been. I totally understand why, on merit, the UFC may want to give Volkanovski a rematch. However, philosophically, I just think it sets a bad precedent in that you have to beat the champion twice to become the champion. And I just don't think that that's how MMA works, has worked, or should work in the future. I think that, look, if it was a super close fight, like Alex versus Max, the first one, fine. If there are massive question marks surrounding it and we need to see it again, fine. If there's a super controversial finish, like Dustin Poirier versus Eddie Alvarez that time when there was the knee and it's controversy and it's this, it's that, we want to run it back, fine. This wasn't controversial at all. It was 2 elite level fighters and one of them got knocked out, right? I would like to see, one, Ilia Topuria be given the grace that he deserves. He went out and beat one of the greatest of all time at featherweight. Allow him to bask in that glory by going out and fighting whoever's next. And allow Alexander Volkanovski the rest that he's deserved. I know that publicly, Alexander Volkanovski has said that rest is difficult for him, and to not be in camp, to not have something is difficult. But I think that if we are going to see an Alexander Volkanovski who is going to be able to come back and try to give us something different, he's going to need time. Now, on the flip side of that, that's difficult because he's 35 now, a year out is 36. And by the time he gets to a training camp, it's late 36, early 37. And so we're really starting to stack that up. And so if he was to say, look, I just want to give it another go, again, it's hard for me to argue that, but I certainly wouldn't be rushing him back.
Well, we can argue it, or we can not argue it, or we can agree with it, or we can't disagree. But what we want to happen and what actually will happen will probably be 2 different things, Harry. Because the likelihood of what's going to happen is that they're going to want to put that rematch on in about 6 or 7 months in Spain, and Alexander Volkanovski and his competitive nature is going to accept that fight. And I feel after what I've seen, and I don't feel it's going to go well for him. I just think he's in there with a younger, better competitor and with more power. And it's the power factor here is that, okay, all he has to do is land once, and he has that confidence in his ability to land as well. So I wouldn't be too argumentative at all of seeing Alexander Volkanovski just moving up to 155. And just let's start a run there. Like, put him in there with the winner of who's Charles fighting at 300 again? Charles, Arman Tsarukyan. Put him in there with maybe like that could be a number 1 contendership fight. Put him in with the winner or loser of that fight. Don't put him straight up at a title shot there. There's a couple of good fights. You don't like that move to 155. Do you think he should stay at 145?
I do. Like, the power at 155 is even worse than the power at 145. Like, and I'm not sure that 10-pound difference is going to stack onto his chin like we think it is, you know. And if we look at the landscape of 155, there's just hitters everywhere. There's just fucking hitters. Arman Tsarukyan's a hitter, Justin Gaethje's a hitter, Dustin Poirier's a hitter, Islam Makhachev can hit. The only one really is Charles Oliveira that you don't look at and be like, Jesus, he might put him away in one shot. But Neal Dariush, not a hitter. Like, I'm not sure I want him to go up. I think Alexander Volkanovski genuinely is in a really tough place right now, in that it feels as though, and this is crazy for me to say it, but it feels as though the time and the run is coming to an end, you know, because he's already beaten everyone at 145. You're not then going to be like, cool, go and fight Josh Emmett or go and fight Movsar Evloev, or go and fight, Arnold Allen. You're not going to do necessarily, you're not going to make him go and do that whole thing, even though, really from a sporting perspective, that's probably what we should be doing. But for them to turn around at 36, 37 and say, cool, give me the next guy at number 1 and I'll beat him and then I'll go fight for the title. Like, fight for the title at what, 38? I don't know.
So, yeah, it's crazy how things change in mixed martial arts, how we can kind of get it's and this was being a quick turnaround for Alex Volkanovski, and if history speaks for itself, the likelihood of getting him back in there and winning that fight with Ilia Topuria is slim, in my opinion, now at this stage. And it was sad to see the end of a really, really, really good reign within the featherweight division. And I think in your severe spotlight, you best described what you felt about Alex Volkanovski's reign at featherweight and as the champion. And you said very well in the article that Alexander Volkanovski should be remembered as one of the bridges between MMA's infancy and MMA's adolescence. So I'm going to let you elaborate on that. This will round up our main event talk, please, on what you mean by that, because I think we need to round up this conversation, just giving Alex Volkanovski the credit that he deserves for showcasing the level of ability that he has over the last number of years.
Yeah, so what I meant by that was there is a new standard in MMA. And the standard in MMA is if you can't do everything, you'll never get anywhere. Ilia Topuria is the first guy outside of Islam Makhachev that has been able to do everything. And he's the first guy that's really, really troubled Alexander Volkanovski. The 2 submissions that he was placed in against Brian Ortega were blips in a fight that was very, very, very one-sided outside of those specific moments, right? The Max Holloway can do the striking really, really, really well. But we saw that as the first fight was close, the second fight wasn't as close, and the third fight was absolutely not close at all. Jose Aldo, again, amazing takedown defense, amazing striking, but nowhere near what he was going to need to be in the grappling to offer something to Alexander Volkanovski. So Alexander Volkanovski took the infancy of MMA and demolished it. He has shown us, he has mandated, alongside some other fighters, obviously, but at the elite level, if you cannot do everything at an elite level, you will not become a champion and you will not retain that title. And in some ways, I think it's very beautiful that the next fighter coming up at 145 who can do everything has managed to take the title. It's almost proved his mandate correct. And I think in years to come, when his competitive drive has slightly ebbed away and he's able to look back less emotionally at this specific run, whether he goes back and beats Ilia Topuria and there's a trilogy or not, I think he will be satisfied that it was somebody like Ilia Topuria who can grapple really, really, really well, both off his back and offensively. He can strike with the best of them. He can do everything. He will be happy, I think, that he handed his torch at that time to somebody of the ilk of Ilia Topuria.
100%. And maybe a little bit unfair for me to say we round off the conversation speaking about Alex Volkanovski. I think it's probably more fair to round off the conversation speaking about the champion, because they say pressure makes diamonds, but pressure also makes UFC world champions as well. And he put the height of pressure on himself before this fight, on top of everything else that goes in a pressure cooker situation, like fighting a world title for a world title against a long reigning champion, to go in and speak with such confidence before the fight, to bring the stardom that he has in. We're really looking at what could be the next big star within the UFC, and Ilia Topuria, what he brings in to the cage, and he's following over in Spain, and the backing of mainstream sports stars, the confidence in his prediction and his abilities. And, he seems to have the full package here, and he went out and delivered, and I'm sure he'll continue to deliver. Harry, I'll give you the last word on Ilia Topuria before we move on to the co-main event.
I expect him to get much, much, much better.
I think what percentage of his skills do you see? I think we've probably only seen about 60 to 65% of what this guy can do in there, to be honest.
I'd say so. Like, it feels to me as though he is the type of fighter that everything he was saying, he believed, but he also didn't believe. He believed that he had the potential to do it, but he didn't believe in the evidence.
He believed, but he didn't know, I would say. And now he knows,
Right.
And
now he knows. And now I think he will unshackle himself from himself and his insecurities, and he will just start fucking hammering dudes. And I would really like to see him not fall into the superstar trap of I'll fight once a year, twice a year. I would love to see Ilia Topuria fighting 3 times a year, if not more, if we can have that happen. I do think that one of the things that was a failing, if you will, of Alexander Volkanovski's meritocracy reign at 145 is that we lost so much 145 churn by him going up and fighting Islam Makhachev twice. I would love to see Ilia Topuria staying at 145. If he has to go and do the fight a Brian Ortega, fight a Yair Rodriguez, fine. Get those fights out of the way. And then let's see the new cohort at 145. Let's see him bring in an absolute new era where he is battling up and coming talent, and that division really, really gets moving. It feels as though there is a potential for not only a new era of champion, but also a new era of 145-pound MMA.
100%. He's already kind of fallen into the trap, unfortunately, of that Conor McGregor call out. Didn't really like that at all. Very slim
chance. Horrendous.
Yeah, it's got to be. And look at, the UFC kind of pushed themselves into a corner in matching Max Holloway against Justin Gaethje now for this BMF title, because he would have been a great second challenger for Ilia Topuria, but it's likely going to be this weekend's fight and the winner between Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez. But at this stage, like I said, just let him go in there and let's start seeing him truck a couple of guys, because I don't think anybody else at 145 has the ability, from what I've seen so far, to go in there and do any damage against Ilia Topuria at this stage of his career, at the very least anyway. But we shall move on. We could talk about this for another hour and a half for sure, but we got to get into this co-main event. Big question coming in here, Harry, was, is Robert Whittaker finished? Is he the same fighter as he was in the past? And I think the answer in my opinion, to those two questions are, is he finished? No, he definitely isn't finished. Is he the fighter that he once was? Definitely not either at the same time. And Paulo Costa came in there and fought a good game plan and fought toe-to-toe. And in fairness to Robert Whittaker too here, Harry, stood toe-to-toe with Costa as well and traded, and I think it was just a slight difference in technical ability on the feet that got Robert Whittaker over the line in this co-main event. What do you think?
So I think Robert Whittaker won because he's a better fighter, but I also think he won because he had the speed advantage, and I think he had just a little bit more in the gas tank, and I think that the cardio element is what brought him back from that last 15 seconds of that first round. The big spinning kick and then the shots that came after. Whittaker was absolutely definitely wobbled, and I think Costa blew a little bit too much of his gas tank trying to get Whittaker out of there. He crowded Whittaker a little bit. Whittaker landed some shots in and around those exchanges, and then the low calf kick, the blitz up the middle, those were very, very, very effective for Robert Whittaker. I was impressed with Costa's ability throughout the fight to sometimes lead the dance. That's not something that we have seen from him in a little while. And equally, I thought it was very impressive where he would allow Whittaker to come in with that darting jab, and he would pull it out of Whittaker and then land his own left hook or right hand over the top. He just didn't have an answer for the low calf kick. He didn't have an answer for the thigh kicks. And by the end, at the end of round 3, Whittaker was just churning him up as he went through, churning him up as he went through. But I was impressed with both fighters, and I completely agree with your assessment of Whittaker's absolutely not finished, but he's absolutely not the same fighter. He's absolutely not the same fighter. I don't think Whittaker is at the apex of that division anymore. I don't think he's going to win a title if he fights Dricus du Plessis. But he's absolutely good enough to beat somebody like Paulo Costa.
For sure. I think the only thing I could add on to top of what you kind of broke down in that fight was, I think, Robert Whittaker's willingness to throw his combinations in threes and fours, where, as we've seen with Paulo Costa before, when you do have that one punch knockout power, you do have a tendency to load up and just want to have that one hitter quitter kind of impactful shot. But, you know, Whittaker kind of worked behind his jab a little bit better, used that calf kick quite well, and look at Paulo Costa used the calf kick quite well as well. But I think Robert Whittaker showed his durability there in this fight, as well as did Paulo Costa too. And overall, for a fight we were unsure what we were going to get, it was a pretty entertaining fight overall, Harry. With both of these guys, not too much to break down here. I mean, like, you can't see, like I said, you know, we can't see either Whittaker or Paulo Costa going on maybe and making waves and maybe challenge. Like, they could challenge perhaps, but I don't think they're going to beat the likes of the du Plessis, the Izzies, maybe, you know. I'd be interested to see how they get on against Chimaev, but I even think Sean Strickland now gets the better of the two of these guys as well. At this stage of their careers, I want to see Paulo Costa more active now. Let's see him more often here, because look, when he does get in there and fight, and I think Dana said this as well, he was like, when we do get him, he does put on good fights. It's just that we haven't seen him enough. For both of these guys, who do you want to see them fight off next? Who do you want to see them compete against?
So maybe a bit of a dream matchup, but I would like to see Kamaru Usman versus Rob Whittaker at 185. And I would like to see Khamzat Chimaev versus Paulo Costa at 185. Those are the fights for me.
If it wasn't Usman for me, I'd like to see, if Usman is deciding to come back down, I'd like to see myself Robert Whittaker against Sean Strickland, just to see how that kind of that I feel that's an interesting fight as well. But I mean, before we move on, like I said, not too much to break down. Any other final thoughts on this fight?
Not really, no. I was very happy to see Rob Whittaker get a win. I think he is vastly underrated by most of the MMA populace because of the losses to Izzy. I just think that he is, very unfortunately, in a division where if Izzy wasn't there or Alex Bahia wasn't there, he'd be a long reigning champion and would have been a long reigning champion. But you just so happened to walk into a division at a time where a superstar was rising. And that does not mean that he, in his prime, wasn't the elite of the elite, because he absolutely was. There was just somebody who was just 0.5%, 1% better than you. And at that level, that is a chasm. It's not, it's not a 1% to me and you. It is an absolute chasm. And I think when we look back at his career, he should be remembered as an elite level fighter. But right now, I think when you go in, people are expecting him to destroy Costa like Izzy did. And at this level of his career, he just isn't going to do that, But all in all, I was impressed with Costa. I agree with you. I'd love to see some more of him. I don't really like his gimmick, but I like his fighting. And equally, for Robert Whittaker, I am happy to see him get wins. And let's see where this specific run will take him.
Yeah, it's a good justifiable win for Robert Whittaker, especially after that last performance where he didn't look himself. So, he gave himself that reward at the very least of going back in there, getting a good win and an exciting fight as well. Not really as much as an exciting fight, to be honest, was that fight between Ian Machado, Garry and Geoff Neal. For one reason or another, we'll get into those reasons right now, Harry. A disciplined performance from Ian Garry. I felt that he had to go in there and win with everything that has been going on over the last number of months, with all of the hate coming his way, with all of the pressure that is now on his back as a young 26-year-old man. He had to go in there on Saturday night and get the win. And he did that. Now, it wasn't his most impressive performance, in my opinion, but I think that the most important thing here is getting the win, especially for him on his rise and with all of the controversy, not controversy, but all the noise that was coming from the outside. He couldn't allow himself to kind of get caught silly in this fight, and he didn't. I think that we talked about it, that Geoff Neal was very dangerous in the pocket. He couldn't find himself too much in the pocket, but to me, it was almost a little bit too defensive at times. To be honest, I don't think that he believed that, he could stay in the pocket long enough to get off a couple of his combinations. We've seen flashes of it 3 or 4 times throughout the fight, and it was something that actually forced Geoff Neal into clinch exchanges in this fight too, was the knee up the middle and that ferocity and the speed of the combinations that did land when Geoff Neal was trying to get in close as well. But I would have liked to seen it just a small little bit more for that little bit more of a decisive win. This was a split decision on the judges' scorecards. I did not agree with that at all. My score was 29-28 to Ian Garry, rounds 1 and rounds 2 to Ian Garry, in a very, very, very tight round 3 that I think Geoff Neal just snuck. But I wouldn't argue against an Ian Garry round there either. And overall, let's not talk about overall yet. Let's talk about what you want to say about this fight first, and then we'll talk about overall.
All the time, whenever I am asked, what does a fighter need to do in a fight? The answer is always win by any cost, right? It doesn't really, it doesn't matter if he goes out and blows Geoff Neal out of the water or if he has a fight just like this, right? However, in Ian Garry's case, I expected much more. This specific matchup felt tailor-made to Ian Garry's style for me, and it felt as though we saw 30% of it. I was impressed with his defensive clinch work, his ability to reverse the clinch. He did a really good job of dragging that underhook up every time, splitting his stance, winning the inside bicep ties, winning the wrist grips. But this is stuff we shouldn't be complimenting him on at this time, and his ceiling and his potential skill set. This should be bread and butter stuff that we're not even watching, right? This is just stuff that's happening in the background, and we're lording over the beautiful crisp combinations. We're lording over the shot selection of the knees, the long teeps, when he catches Geoff Neal with some lovely head movement and drops a right hand on him. It's when he's catching Geoff Neal mid-combination and just stops the combination in its tracks. But we saw maybe 1 or 2 flashes around of who Ian Garry can be, and then it was a lot of Geoff Neal doing his best to get into the pocket and Ian either removing himself completely from danger or taking a shot to land a couple of shots. And if we saw Ian that was in the mind frame that he was against Neil Magny, or the mind frame he was against D-Rod, then I think the result would have been far, far, far wider of a win for him. And I think
possibly even a finish would have came. Like when we're saying that, we only saw flashes of what he can do with his combinations. What I'm talking about, and if you want to compare it to a fight that he has had, was talk about the finishing sequence that he had in the Song Kenan fight, where, what we seen was the initial barrage of a combination that hurts Song, but then we see the finish and follow up, and I don't think we saw any of those finish and follow ups. It was the 1, 2, 3, 4 that we seen, but what we wanted to see is what we did see in the Song Kenan, where it came 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 comes after that as well. With whatever he throws, whether it's punches, kicks, knees, or anything, it was just a slight bit of hesitancy to really let go on the feet And look at it, was probably down to the respect of Geoff Neal's power, which he's right to do so. But look at, I'm on a platform here, and I give out about a fighter called Israel Adesanya who doesn't do the same here. So it'd be unfair for me to do that with Israel Adesanya and not do that here with Ian Garry. Now, this is the argument. You've got to fight to win. You've got to fight safe. And I understand that. I think I can be a little bit more forgiveful of Ian Garry in that scenario because he is a younger fighter, because he's, has to reach his full potential. But, from what we've seen in previous fights, I don't think that his full potential was on show on Saturday night. But like I said, there was lots of different factors going in there. I think what would be really worrying if this continued into his next number of fights, because that's where we're going to see real problems. Because the tests are going to get harder. They're not going to get any easier from here as you're rising up the rankings. But I think overall, an impressive performance with the whole overall landscape of everything that's been going on, the pressure that was on this young man's back. I think, he played it somewhat well, but I don't think he would have maybe expected the boos from the crowd at the press conference or at the event as much as what they were. We played into it nice, but the key ingredient of him moving forward in his career, Harry, and you said it as well, was getting that win on Saturday night, and that's what he did. Was there anything that you seen in the fight that you were impressed with?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots in the fight that I was impressed with. I thought his head movement's good. His footwork was really, really good. The back teep, very, very nice. The knee, very, very nice. He saw a jump knee at one point, which was really, really beautiful. And then just his ability to stick Geoff Neal with that right hand as Geoff Neal was coming in mid-combination just shows you a really, really, really superior level of timing. But just to piggyback off what you've said there, like, that's not a champion's performance. And I think we're right to criticize him at the level of Israel Adesanya. Why? Because we're expecting him to reach that sort of level, right? And the pressure and the everything, well, part of that is self-made, right? Part of that is him making a narrative about, whether it's the Geoff Neal t-shirt, whether it's the videos of putting pizza outside D-Rod's room, whether it's the public service announcements videos, or this or that talk or the next talk, or, some of the things he says about being too big for Ireland, or this or that or the next thing.
Well, the Ireland thing was probably taken a little bit out of context a little bit, but yeah, like, you're right in what you're saying with, what comes out of your mouth before a fight is very, very important, especially when you're talking about the fight. He talked about leaving Geoff Neal face down on the canvas and standing over his unconscious body in this fight. We didn't even see a glimmer of that. He landed some good combinations, but he didn't really hurt Geoff Neal all of that much in this fight. And, that's kind of upping the pressure on yourself and somewhat when you don't do that. It's like one thing that I did, I think I said on the setup, it was either the setup or the out triangle, was, we haven't seen that like killer knockout power. Like we have seen, like Ilia Topuria has that touch of death in his hands, and he gets in there, he can land one. And Ian Garry is more so that death by 1,000 cuts kind of style, where he is landing these shots. I'm not saying he doesn't have power, but he hasn't seemed to develop it yet. I don't think if we've seen it now, I don't expect to see it in further future fights either, where he can go in there and land that one punch and get a guy out of there. More so, it's those combinations that have done the most damage for Ian Garry in these previous fights, in this fight as well. But like we said, it was more so, what came after that initial flurry needed to be a little bit more for me in this fight anyway.
I agree. I expected much more from him. And I understand that there's always extenuating circumstances that are on surrounding a fighter. There's always injuries. There's always, these people are just humans at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. They've got life shit. There's family stuff. There'll be financial worries. There'll be his baby may be unwell, or, he's had a rut with his missus, just like every other fucker.
Coming back from pneumonia as well. But like, I mean, maybe that played a bit of a factor, although his cardio didn't look good. He didn't look that bad. It looked like he didn't slow down. He looked fairly sharp from start to finish as well. I don't know.
Difference is-
Without knowing a whole lot, I think it was more of a kind of a pressure cooker situation where he just made a decision that he was not going to take too many chances in this fight because the fear of losing it would have been so detrimental at this stage of his career if he had went out and lost that with everything that had went on or everything that did go on ahead of this fight.
But I don't think that's acceptable. Like, in the sense that Ilia Topuria put even more pressure on himself by talking the maddest shit in a title fight, and he goes out and finishes Alexander Volkanovski in the second round. Like, I completely agree, and I will always stand on a fighter needs to win, right? And so I give all of the props in the world to Ian Garry for going out and winning. But there is a difference, I think. He knew after that first round that he was better than Geoff Neal. He knew. And so let's see a little bit more. If you go out and you try and you put your foot on the gas a little bit and it doesn't go how you want and you want to dial it back and go back to game plan number one, fine, no problem. I didn't see the trying. And I think that's what irks me.
How much do you think Geoff Neal's forward pressure and the fact that he wanted to initiate in the clinch to kind of nullify Ian Garry's attacks on the feet played effect into Ian Garry's game plan coming in here? And do you think that that is something that Ian is going to have to get more used to and try and combat a little bit in future fights? Because, you know, he is very smooth, very fast on the feet, very slick on the feet, and there's not going to be too many people that will get him. So now we did see those clinch exchanges, and you mentioned that he did battle those clinch exchanges as well. We didn't see any level changes. We didn't see any takedowns here. I kind of shot for the stars here in my prediction, thinking that, you know, we might, you know, he's training with Maia, he's training with Charles Oliveira. You know, are we going to see some of his grappling in here? Is that a section that we know he might have been more advantage over Geoff Neal, or bringing in a more advantage into grappling? We don't really know because we didn't see it all that well. What are your thoughts on all of that?
So I don't play too much into the mind of Geoff Neal's forward pressure because Ian is perfect for that style. He's long, he's rangy, and he should have been able to, and was trying to, walk Geoff Neal onto shots, and did so pretty effectively a number of times, right? I think in terms of the defensive awareness in the clinch, I completely agree with you. I think he looks great defensively in the clinch. He did everything he needed to do, did it all really, really well, and then reversed the way out of his clinch. And there was absolutely no danger in those clinches for him. Perfect.
And there was a couple of people saying, oh, like a couple of people I was watching and seeing other few things is that, oh, he stayed in the clinch for too long. But when you are fighting a power puncher there, you have to be extremely careful when you're separating there. So I think a lot of people don't realize that, or maybe didn't respect the power of Geoff Neal in that position as well, because you're right in the pocket there, and you can take a big shot as well when you're exiting from those clinches.
Yeah, ask Merab and Henry Cejudo.
Yeah.
I think on the point about is he going to need to get used to this style, well, let's just have a look at the people above him. If Kamaru Usman comes back down to 170, you don't think he's going to try and put Ian in a clinch? You best fucking believe he is. Leon Edwards, master of the clinch. Sean Brady, you don't think he's going to get to a clinch and level change onto a double? Shavkat Rakhmonov, you don't think he could put him in a clinch and maybe start doing some work from there? Like, if this is the route to attempt victory for Ian Garry, we've already seen against somebody like Geoff Neal, who, let's be honest, isn't the best wrestler in the division, right? That he is susceptible to being found in the clinch, right? So there is going to need to be work and layers added in order to detract people away from getting to the clinch. We saw it with Ilia Topuria. Alexander Volkanovski said, clinch, grand, here's 6 knees, and now ask me if you want to be in the clinch again. With somebody like Merab and Henry, there was obviously like vast wrestling exchanges, and they both proved to each other that they didn't really want to be there because they both could be taken down at different times. Ian Garry needs something, and I would like to see him in his next fight, if it is Colby Covington, as he's asked for it to be. And again, you don't think Colby is going to push him against the fence and try and clinch with him? Like, that might be smart of Ian to force, I guess, a level up, to force somebody to come in and to sort of give him 6 to 8 to 10 weeks worth of pure adding skills to the game plan. I don't know, but yeah, I wasn't impressed by Ian Garry in this on a whole. Given my expectation of him, given what I think of him as a fighter, I thought I'd see more.
Yep, that's a fair assessment. Look, you mentioned Colby Covington. That's what Ian Garry wants next. Lots of other options there as well. You have your Sean Brady's, you have your Wonderboy Thompsons. Look, we know what Ian wants, whether it will happen or not. Personally, I can see Colby Covington coming over to Ireland to fight Ian Garry if that was the plan. Maybe more so suited for a co-main event slot. I think a more realistic one, if we are pushing for that Irish card, would be like if Sean Brady, but even more so, he kind of poured cold water on that today on the MMA Hour. All roads here are leading a little bit to Wonderboy Thompson. He wants that fight as well, although he didn't mention it either. I don't know whether Wonderboy wants it at this stage. What do you think is the likely path forward for Ian Garry? If you had a gun to your head now, not who you want to see him, who you want first and who you will think that he will face off next?
So I think they're going to try and do the Colby Covington matchup. One, because Colby is a heel. Ian, again, seems to be building a brand around creating narratives with fighters, and the UFC love that. Wonderboy, I think if they're doing a show in Ireland, it's more likely to be Wonderboy. Wonderboy at this stage of his career will travel. He will kind of do not what he's told, but what's asked of him. I think he is more malleable to a situation than Colby Covington. But in the same vein, Colby is in a tough spot right now in that he's not had a win in a little while. It seems as though the fans have sort of turned on him a little piece. And so he's not the A side, I think, in that Ian Garry type of equation. And so maybe the UFC say, look, if you want to get anywhere near a title shot again, you go out and you beat Ian Garry in Ireland. And if that's the case, then Colby Covington has some decisions to make. But I suspect the UFC would like to do Colby in that. Ex-title challenger, had some very close fights with Kamaru Usman, and equally talks a lot of shit and is getting on in his career too. And so for Ian Garry to go in, he doesn't have to go and fight a Shavkat Rakhmonov. He doesn't have to go in and fight a Sean Brady, both of which are very, very, very tough fights. And they can use the name of Colby Covington, who is, again, not going to be around forever in that welterweight division. So on the way down, you allow Ian Garry to build up the name in the same vein you would do with Wonderboy Thompson. But I think that's to even more of a greater degree that you'd be building a name off Wonderboy Thompson. And then you push him immediately into a title shot if he beats Colby Covington.
Yep. I am very interested to see what happens with that situation. I think the Ian Colby fight makes the most sense out of any fight right now with the heat you've got going in there, how much you can build it. I would worry that it's too big of a fight to kind of piggyback off of maybe what Ian said on the pre-fight press conference, and that, not that I just think that he worded that a little bit incorrectly. I was surprised when it came out of his mouth, but then, after the fact, I can understand what he said. But, I feel an important factor of his rise, and maybe it's a conversation for another day, is reconnecting with the Irish audience, getting the backing of the Irish audience, and being over in Ireland, speaking to as much media as you can over in Ireland as well, and building up and really pushing for that Irish show will be and I tell you what, a main event. The kid over here, I will be flying back. If Ian Garry versus Colby Covington was announced for a Dublin show, you ain't keeping me out of Ireland for that. I'm 100% coming back. I want to be right stuck in the middle of it. And it would be something special. Look at 1 hour in. We've only gone 3 fights already, Harry. Let's blast through the rest of these fights. But we got to stop at Merab versus Henry Cejudo. A really, really great fight here. I had a topsy-turvy opinion heading into this fight, but ultimately my final call was the correct one. I leaned on Merab to get the win, and Henry to maybe kind of call quits on his career. Nothing official yet, but what is official is the result, and that was a unanimous decision win for Merab, and a very, very impressive performance, which makes him absolutely undeniable at 135 pounds for the next title shot against the winner of Sean O'Malley and Chito Vera next month.
I don't think Henry should retire. I was so impressed by both of them that I don't see Henry winning a title, right? I think, and the reason I say that is because I think Merab goes in and I think if it's Chito Vera, which he probably won't be, I think he beats Chito Vera, and I think he gives Sean O'Malley a tough old run for his money as well. And so I don't think Henry beats Merab if he becomes champion, but I was just so impressed with both of their willing to fight everywhere. I thought Henry looked sharp on the feet. He landed some nice shots on Merab. I was so impressed with Merab's diversity of takedowns. Some of those single legs were just absolutely gorgeous. Some of Henry's counters were just absolutely fucking phenomenal. It was great to see both of them using half butterfly, and reverse Z-guard type get-ups, which we've seen Alexander Volkanovski, Arman Tsarukyan, Joel Alvarez, these sorts of people use in order to get back to scrambles. And just over and aback, it was just a beautiful display of MMA from both men. The one thing I will say is that 135-pound division is kind of botched now, in that Merab has almost fought everyone already. And so by the time
he's gone in there and maxed Holloway at everybody. So yes, he's had to fight so hard to get this chance. I don't even think he should have fought this fight to have to get the opportunity to fight for a title. But yeah, I mean, what does a man have to do here? And hearing Dana White speak after the fight, I don't think he did himself any favors by refusing to fight Aljamain Sterling. It's something that Dana White has historically not liked, and the UFC have not liked, and this is why they put Henry in this spot to see if he could get the job done over Merab, try and set up that fight with Sean O'Malley. But what we have, I think, is going to be a much better fight anyway, and a much more competitive fight than what we would have seen with Henry Cejudo. I agree with you that I don't think Henry should retire based off that. I think he had a fantastic round one, landed an over the top left hook that hurt Merab in round one. It was actually a similar enough shot that Merab got hit when he fought Marlon Moraes as well. And it's something I think Sean O'Malley will be looking at coming into this fight if he does end up beating Chito Vera and does face off with Dvalishvili as well. But I think overall, as all fights really, it was the pressure and the pace that Merab set. And the overall strength, I believe, in a lot of those grappling positions as well. I do believe he was that just a little bit stronger than Henry. Henry, obviously, a little bit more technical savvy in the grappling exchanges. But I think Merab's pressure, his strength, putting his weight down on Henry and making him work there a little bit harder in those clinch exchanges. We've seen him coming out in the second round. Didn't look as springy, didn't look as energetic. Everything seemed a lot more labored. And that's where Merab just kind of came in and kind of swamped him, and kind of stuck to him like a wet blanket, really. And that was enough for him to kind of go through, get the unanimous decision. All three judges scored the fight at 29-28 for Merab, with rounds 1 for Henry, rounds 2 and 3 for Merab. And, a very, very impressive performance, a very exciting fight. One thing that we have been critical of with Merab is sometimes it's not really that exciting to watch him kind of swarm over his opponents. But, this one was an entertaining fight, and we have to play that Henry was a big factor in this being an entertaining fight as well.
Huge. Yeah, huge. This is the Alexander Volkanovski effect, right? Where you have to be able to do everything. And both fighters were forced to do everything all of the time.
Yeah,
and that's
you have to be able to do everything for a maximum of 5 or 3 rounds in this case. But when you're talking championship level, you got to be able to do everything for 5 rounds as well, which always isn't easy. Henry did do everything for 5 minutes in this fight. It was his inability to do it into the second and third rounds that cost him here. Merab just took advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like every other fighter that fights Merab, they don't really pay enough attention to how good of a gas tank he has. I think it's probably because it's so unbelievable that they know that they're elite level athletes and they are expending so much energy. And then when they go to the corner after round 1, they're like, thank fuck, he's bollocksed as well. Then he comes out and is bright as a pin, and you're like, I don't understand what the fuck's happening here. Like, what the fuck is happening? And you could see at the end of round 2, Merab comes out, he's bouncing on his feet, and Henry's like, oh fuck, I've got to fight.
So demoralizing, like it's so
horrific.
demoralizing. Yeah, it's crazy.
Did you see that Ray Longo did an interview? I think it was with John Anik, and they were asked about the warm up, and they said that Merab did 3 hard 5s with Aljo just to warm up.
Crazy.
Like, what
insane levels of cardio from Merab, and his pressure and his pace is unmatched inside the octagon for me so far. Who would you like to see if you don't want to see Henry Cejudo? Who do you think is good for him next, Harry?
I think Chito Vera will lose the title shot, and so I wouldn't mind Chito Vera. I also wouldn't mind Cousin Umar. I also wouldn't mind a Rob Font. Right? I think keep him around. I don't know how many fights he's got left on his contract, but let's say he's got 2 or 3. Sure, look, chuck him in, you know? I still think he will beat a lot of guys in the top 10 at 135 pounds. And I don't think he needs to go out like this.
Yeah, agreed. It'd be interesting to see. Obviously, we're probably both in agreement. Merab should be at this stage #1 contender if he was not considered that already by anyone. There ain't no doubt about it anymore. But we should move on. First fight of the night. That was Anthony Fluffy Hernandez versus your guy Roman Kopylov. Harry, a good start for Kopylov in round 1, but just what we were saying in the previous fight is that you got to be able to do it throughout the 3 rounds. And Fluffy Hernandez was eating up. It was the body kicks, those left body kicks from Kopylov. That's his trademark shot. They're vicious. They did play an effect on Fluffy Hernandez in round 1, but the durability, the confidence, the forward pressure, and obviously not giving up on the takedown was a huge factor in Anthony Hernandez getting the win here. Kopylov did well to keep the fight on the feet for as long as he could. Slipped in, got taken down in round 2, and Hernandez went to work there and secured a rear naked choke. Really good performance here by Fluffy Hernandez. I'm sure you were just as impressed with him as I am as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, Kopylov has got a cultured left hand and a cultured left body kick. But the problem in round 1 is he showed his hand too early. There's not enough feinting. There's not enough setting up. And Fluffy was like, oh, okay, I know what he's got now. And then just went to work. He barreled in through those shots, got to the clinch, tried to take Kopylov down. Fair play. Kopylov did a really good job in round 1 of staying on his feet and making it tough for Fluffy to get actually 2 solid takedown positions. But then in round 2, Fluffy's like, I got 10 minutes here and I know what you've got. You've got 1 left hand and you've got 1 body kick and maybe a couple of high kicks. And I know, because I've given the evidence to myself, that if I chuck a couple of jabs out there, you start backing up, I barrel you into the cage, and now I just need 1. I just need 1. And when he got 1, it was beautiful. He just immediately went to work. He oscillated between threatening rear naked chokes, using the rear naked choke to start ratcheting Kopylov onto his belly, and then also started threatening for head and arm triangles in order to either make Kopylov choose to turn all the way in and give his back further, or to drop into the mount and obviously get head and arm triangled. Kopylov made the right choice. Not an easy choice to make, but he made the right choice by giving his back. And then Hernandez just chest to back the entire time, punching chokes. And the one thing I always like, not just because it's grappling, but the one thing I like is Hernandez locked in the choke and he started smiling and he looked to his corner and said, it's done. Don't worry about it. I've got him. Don't worry. It's done. And he knew. Beautiful.
Perfectly called by your boy, Neal here. Round 2 submission. Fair play, Sean. He called the main event. It was a good night of picks for a lot of the Severe MMA team, in fairness, including yourself, Harry, in this one. It was Hernandez that got the second round submission. Who do you want to see him next?
Neal Magny.
Neal Magny is a welterweight, sir.
75. Yeah. Why did I put Neal Magny? Who could we do? I know that they have a matchup already, but I wouldn't mind seeing him in a Caio Bahaio type.
I was going to guess that you're going to say Caio is a good. He's a good guy for all of these, and we've been talking about middle of the road middleweight fighters right now. Guys are breaking into the top 10, and I think Caio Bahaio is a good test for all of them. So, be interesting to see.
That's a fight night main event right there.
100%, 100%, yeah, 100%. We shall move on. Amanda Lemos, Mackenzie Dern in the women's 115-pound division. I mean, we call this fairly straight up as well. It was a tale of two fights. What would happen if the fight was on the mat? What would happen if the fight was on the feet? We've seen Mackenzie Dern barreling forward with wild hooks. We've seen Amanda Lemos landing those clean strikes on the feet, doing lots of damage. We've seen Mackenzie Dern having some success when the fight did hit the ground. I think a big thing in this is the fight could have very well been stopped in the second round. It looks like Mackenzie Dern probably broke her nose or her orbital bone at that stage of the fight. When you see a fighter going down and holding her face like that, it's like, oh no. Now the referees and the officials and maybe people thinking otherwise might feel vindicated by the fact that Mackenzie Dern went into round 3 and won the round and everything like that, but it was a clear advantage to Lemos in rounds 1 and rounds 2 for me, and I thought the fight would have had to been stopped for Mackenzie Dern to round 1 was somewhat close, to be honest, but I did score it for Amanda Lemos, and I think, with Mackenzie Dern, it's the same old here, Harry. She just kind of gets a little bit too loose on the feet. I mean, there's no questioning her durability, her heart, and her toughness. It's unbelievable, and she showed that in abundance on Saturday night. But it's just that massive gap in her striking that seems to be holding her off from really making a march towards the title here in the strawweight division.
Yeah, I don't know how I scored that first round, to be honest, because Lemos looks good on the feet, but there was a significant portion. There was about 2 minutes of Mackenzie Dern on top, and she landed a couple of really, really nice elbows from that position. There was some good ground and pound. There was obviously positional dominance doesn't mean anything, but she was in good spots, landing damage for a significant amount of time. And I need to go and watch that first round back again. I didn't score it for Mackenzie Dern. I did score it from Amanda Lemos, but coming out of it, I said to myself, well, that was a close round. Like that was a close round. Round 2, obviously, I mean, I'd happy to see that as a 10-8. I'd have no problem.
Yeah, it was borderline. For round 1, 10-9 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Round 2, a 10-9 on all 3 judges' scorecards. But yeah, we were really tinkering on a 10-8 there in round 2, weren't we?
We were, and then round 3, I was happy that that's a Mackenzie Dern round. But I think you could make an argument for this being a Mackenzie Dern win. I could think you can make an argument for this being a draw if you want to teeter on that 10-8 in the second round. But you're absolutely right that it's the same old story. Mackenzie Dern is tough as they come, as hard as they come, hard as fucking nails. And when she hits the ground, she's absolutely masterful. She can pass with beautiful fluidity and land big shots from top. She can sweep you from bottom and then land big shots from top. It's just her unrelenting nature to barrel into shots. Like defensively, she didn't look horrendous in those first sort of 45 seconds to a minute. But when the first big shot from Amanda Lemos lands, it's finished.
It all goes out the window, doesn't it?
Everything goes out the window, and she's barreling in. She doesn't take her feet with her when she throws shots. She doesn't take her feet with her when she's defending shots. And it's just awful until she gets the clinch. And when she gets to the clinch or she ducks under and level changes, again, she can look absolutely fucking brilliant. But we're talking about elite level competition here, and they're not poor enough on the ground that Mackenzie Dern can just slice through them and sub them. But they're not good enough that they can keep her off her in certain situations. So she's always going to be competitive in those types of fights. But Jesus, I don't know. It was tough watching that second round. It was tough.
Yeah, sure it was. And look at, for longevity purposes, it doesn't do Mackenzie Dern any favors. But look at, she showcased her heart coming in to kind of bounce back from that and win that round 3 and all 3 judges scorecards. So fair play to her for that, but we're not seeing that level of advancement on the feet that would give me any great confidence that she's going to put herself into a position to even fight for a title now at this stage, to be honest. Moving on to the heavyweights real quickly, a quick assessment of this one, Harry. Marcos Rodrigo, the Lima, took on Justin Tafa, who stepped in for his brother. No, it was Junior Tafa that stepped in for his brother, Justin Tafa, in the heavyweight division. And look, the writing was on the wall for this one, Harry. Taking a fight at 24-hour notice in the heavyweight division. We've seen, Tom Aspinall do it on a couple of days' notice, but it was a big ask for Tafa coming in here, and I think somewhat the Lima made it a little bit more difficult for himself than what it could have been, really, too, couldn't he?
It's big meaty men doing big meaty men things, and Junior Tafa didn't check leg kicks and paid for it. That's literally the story of the fight. De Lima banged a few leg kicks in, banged a few more leg kicks in, hurt him, did the usual thing and take a man down when he's hurt. Because
how was your head? Your head was in your hands, or your head was in your hands at that stage, Harry. I'd imagine that you love that level of fight IQ, don't you?
Just horrific. And then round 2 comes out, drops him with leg kicks, looks at him for a bit. The referee doesn't step in, and then he puts a couple of coffin nails in. Fair play to Junior Tafa, because without Junior Tafa, De Lima wouldn't have had a fight, right? And so you have to give him mad props and mad respect for stepping up on 24 hours notice. Clearly was not in fight shape whatsoever, and just got fucking mollywopped, really. But sure, these things happen in heavyweight MMA.
They sure do. What happens in bantamweight MMA is much, much different. And Rinya Nakamura took on Carlos Vera, and top prospect. I don't think showed his top level of his abilities. Has to be said that he broke his hand in round 1. He said that he did after the fight, and I think that took away savagely from his performance, but showed some great scrambles here, Harry, in this one. Showcased some really good top control against a guy who was happy to try and play leg lock games and play a almost full-on heavy Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game. And I think he's somewhat lucky that Rinya only had one hand, or he would have eaten a lot of damage there. But I don't think that we can judge the full level of abilities from Rinya Nakamura, who is also a fantastic striker here. And I was very, very confused at the way he was tackling this fight, but it did make a hell of a lot more sense when he came out and said that he had hurt his hand in round 1, and it kind of took away from his performance there a little bit. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, not impressed. Not even impressed really with the ability for actual top control. There was too much scrambling for me here. And look, the game plan that Vera adopted is one that Nakamura is probably not going to see again in his UFC tenure, because it doesn't fucking work, right? Just searching for leg locks, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's so rare that we see a leg lock finish in MMA, let alone that we see them being used consistently enough to...
There's this fantasy with Joe Rogan as well, with this Ryan Hall and this kind of style as well, where he was like, oh, it doesn't work. Like, what happened with Ryan Hall when he fought and did that against Ilia Topuria? He almost got his head sent down through the canvas with shots. It just simply doesn't work. Garry Tonin was the same over in one championship. It's like you're a very, very dangerous game. And I was kind of similar to you. I was disappointed that Rinya kind of played into it a little bit more than what he should have. Even if you do have only one hand, stand these guys up and throw your kicks. Kicks, do something else rather than play it. But maybe he wanted to prove the point to himself that he could hang in with a guy like that with a decent guard game and a somewhat decent leg lock game. But you're going to have to be an absolute specialist and very, very lucky to pull one of those kind of leg locks off in the UFC in this day and age. Harry, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, look, I think the only exception to the rule, right? There's like 2 exceptions to the rule. One is Claudio Puelles, and every time he knee bars somebody, I come on here and I say they're all fucking scrubs. How did they get subbed by that? And then the second one is Garry Tonin, and the reason why I say that is because he is the absolute apex when it comes to submission grappling. But then Tan Lee said, "Oh, you want to play leg locks? Cool. I'm gonna elbow you through the fucking floor."
Yeah, well, I can smash my fist through your face in mixed martial arts. That's the problem with playing a leg lock game or playing the guard game when you're fighting inside of a cage. Like, it just simply doesn't work, and it doesn't look good. It's not entertaining. It's very frustrating for everyone who's watching. I'm sure it was frustrating for Nakamura. I liked his attitude after the fight. He was very disappointed with his performance. So I'm wondering, is that going to light a fire under him? Obviously, dealing with those injuries and everything like that is not easy to combat, and it can take away from your grappling somewhat as well in your positional work. If you can't put any weight on the hand, you probably know a lot better than that than what I would, Harry. But on some positions when it comes to posting, maybe having that grip strength as well that you need to advance position as well. Having a broken hand doesn't help out. But I think this is one that, he went in there, he won. We could kind of write it off with Rinya Nakamura. We did talk him up. I will continue to talk him up. I mean, Shawnee gave him, it was good enough. Like, it was probably his worst performance in the octagon, but it was good enough for Shawnee to say that he was going to become a future champion. So you definitely have to take that. And Shawnee doesn't say that without being confident in it either about a lot of fighters. So I think that can go a long way. But I think we're going to see much better performances, much better fights from Rinya Nakamura. Who do you want to see him in there next with, Harry?
Montel Jackson.
Montel Jackson sounds like a member out of a Motown kind of music group back in the 70s. Let's give it to him. Let's slow rise him up the division, and let's see what happens with the Japanese bantamweight fighter. Mingling Zhang versus Brendson Ribeiro. These boys coming in here, Harry, with serious power, with an inability to go past one round, and it's exactly what we've seen here. No really massive technological kind of striking here. Just two boys that said, I'm going to try and knock you out before you knock me out, kill or be killed attitude. And I know you enjoy the technical side of things. I like when two bruisers go in and throw down like this as well, once it's not happening every single fight, of course. But this fight was exciting for as long as it landed. Two boys throwing heavy shots, two guys that are probably not going to make too much waves in their respective divisions. So I'm curious to hear what you thought about this fight.
Yeah, fair play to both lads. Both lads went in. Both lads wanted to finish the fight early. That's their MO. One of them got finished. One of them did the finishing. I would like to see Zhang fight Marcin Prachnio next.
Very interesting fight. Yeah, I'm down with that as well. Looking at Danny Barlow versus Josh Quinlan, I was very, very impressed here, Harry, with Danny Barlow in this fight, to be honest. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts were on him in this fight. Undefeated early in his career, but we might have something to work with here.
Definitely. Patient in the first round. Read Quinlan, started to get some looks, started to get himself working, really started to pick up through the gears as we got to round 2. And then round 3, lands the right hand. Quinlan is absolutely on skates, tries his best, bless him, to get back up to his feet. And Barlow just picked up a hammer out of his back pocket and drove it straight through his fucking skull. I really liked the finishing IQ to this one. Didn't waste any punches. Didn't allow Quinlan the time to get back up, scramble. Didn't look to try and fucking wrestle or any dumb shit like that. Just noticed he had his man hurt, picked his shots, very cerebral about it, and put his man away.
Great stoppage by the ref as well. Yeah, and a guy who broke his arm, I think, in the first round, he came out and said after the fight as well. So he'd injured something. I want to say it was a broken arm. Apologies if I got that wrong, but I'm sure I definitely remember him saying that he had picked up a big injury in round 1 in that fight. I'm very impressed with a guy who has. I had it scored rounds 1 and rounds 2 for him, so he could have went into that round 3 and just kind of stayed doing what he's doing. Push for the finish. 8-0 in the welterweight division. Definitely one to watch there is Danny Barlow. We move on to the Welsh gangster, your fellow countryman Oban Ilia, went in there against Val Woodburn. Took a little bit of a scare in the early stages of the fight here. Val did clip him. Well, I think it was what really caused it, Harry, was Oban connected with a combination and got a little bit too excited, I think, and rushed in and got caught, but managed to recover well, managed to get the fight down, and managed to go on and win a relatively one-sided decision. What did you make of his performance as a UFC debut performance, Harry?
He needs to chill the fuck out, doesn't he? It's not Cage Warriors anymore.
It's the UFC. It's his debut, so I think we can be a little bit forgiveful with that as well. I think after the initial scare, he did learn his lessons a little bit and slow down a little bit. I think you're not going to have that luxury against a better fighter, so he's going to have to try and make that improvement going into his next number of fights.
I agree. And I mean, the fighter I matched him up with was Danny Barlow. I'd like to see both of them. Both guys coming into the UFC. Obviously, Oban is carrying a little bit more of a name, but Danny Barlow looked great against, a Josh Quinlan who we've seen in the UFC for a little while. And I think the thing that interests me about that is Oban obviously has some power on the feet, but can do the wrestling things and can do the grappling things pretty well. And then we saw Mr. Barlow do a really, really, really good job of just banging away and being cerebral and sticking to a game plan. And so I would like to see both of them go at it specifically. But I would, more than that, I would like to see Oban come into his next one, forget about the ties to Chael necessarily. Like, now this is your time to go and build your own brand and your own legacy. I thought it was beautiful that Chael was there. I thought it was beautiful that they got the photo opportunity at the end. That's fine. Now see Chael as a fan, right? Maybe a mentor, maybe a whatever. That's fine on potentially business sides of things or whatever it is. But now Oban needs to realize that he's in the UFC, and I think he will do, based on that first round against Val Woodburn. He proved to himself he could go in and look, Val Woodburn isn't a UFC level fighter, but I think he proved to himself that he could don the gloves, he could do fight week, he could carry the media, and then he could go out onto the bright lights and get a win. And so, like we talked about with Ilia Topuria, I expect to see Oban Elliott get much, much, much better as we go through his career in the UFC.
The point about he needs to kind of get used to being in the UFC is a very valid point. And, Oban is so down to earth and so likable, so personable, laying it all down the line where he's like almost can't believe of where he is. And that can happen. It's not talked about enough for a lot of fighters that do make their UFC debut, where you've been watching all of these stars on the TV coming up, watching Chael Sonnen as his hero, seeing Bruce Buffer, seeing all the legends there. He was saying, I was shaking hands. I can't remember who I was talking to. CM Punk was there. And he was like literally saying after the fight, I can't believe that I'm here. But he needs to put that mentality to the curb because he's here. He deserves to be there. And it's his proper opportunity to help himself grow into this, gain that confidence in the level of his ability, and just kind of reassure himself that he deserves to be in the position that he is right now. And when that kind of mentality comes in with Oban, I think we'll see a much better performance as we did see on his UFC debut. I think he's going to have to be much, much better as he moves up the rankings than he's showcased. But I think with everything that was going on, all the excitement, all the energy, being on aerials, meeting your heroes, it was all probably a little bit surreal for him, but we've seen that's what when we talk about octagon jitters, that's octagon jitters. It's actually you've found yourself in a position that you've dreamed of for many, many years, and a lot of fighters go in there and they're not able to get the job done on the first fight. So Oban got the job done, on top of everything else that you said, came back from adversity early in round one and picked up the win. So good for him. It's going to be a great journey. And I'm excited to see what's next for him. What's next for him, Harry? What do you want to see? You did you say it already? You said Danny
Barlow, yeah.
You said Danny Barlow.
Like, I think it's a well-matched fight. I don't think Danny Barlow is so dramatically better than Oban Elliott. And I also think I would like to see Oban get to 3-0 in the UFC before we put him against anyone that we've heard of before.
Oh yeah, no rush here at all. In Oban Elliott, let him kind of slow build into his position in the welterweight rankings. The opening fight of the card, 125-pound division, Miranda Maverick picked up a unanimous decision win over Andrea Lee. I thought this was a very, very good performance and a very patient performance from Miranda Maverick, and I would go as far as to say her best performance so far inside the octagon. Harry, would you agree?
I would. I think she literally made one mistake in the whole fight. And that one mistake was she tried for a slightly risky takedown in round one. And Andrea Lee did a very, very good job at reversing that position and putting Miranda Maverick in bottom side control, but Miranda Maverick did a really excellent job at tying up Andrea Lee, getting back to her feet, and then just dominating the rest of the fight. This is the type of performance that I think we all expected from Miranda Maverick maybe 2 years ago. And unfortunately, as we have said before, when you come up in a class of Miranda Maverick, Macy Barber, and Erin Blanchfield, some people just progress faster than others. And I'm very, very, very glad that we have gotten to see Miranda Maverick have the opportunity to go back, fix the holes, mature, and now she's absolutely here. And we're going to have some fun with Miranda Maverick for sure.
Great win over Andrea Lee. Look, it has to be said, Andrea Lee didn't look quite herself in there. Very kind of hesitant to get off her shots. Didn't really have any, oomph to move forward and try and win this fight. She was more happy to kind of be the nail in this one more so than what Miranda Maverick was. And look, it's a good win for Miranda Maverick. It's a one that will give her a lot of confidence. And who would you like to see her in there next with?
So I don't know, if I'm honest. I don't know what the right name is here. Do we push Maverick? Do we allow her an ability to sort of take another fight at this level? Do we... I don't know. I'm just checking her age. I forgot. See, she's only 26.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Only 26 here. I think a great fight for her would be Tracy Cortez.
So I'm fine with that. I think my only difficulty with that fight is they're both, like Tracy Cortez, I think is either undefeated or she's on a really good run at the moment. And so I wouldn't want to derail one or potentially both of them from that specific run. I'd like to see them join the rankings a little higher. But sure, from a stylist perspective, I love it. Great fight.
I mean, it's probably unfair for Miranda Maverick, Casey O'Neill, another one. But like I said, those are all names that are going to propel you into the rankings too. So maybe, maybe Veronica Hardy. What about Veronica Hardy?
That's a fucking horrendous fight for Veronica Hardy. But for Miranda Maverick, you could do that, right? Maybe Veronica Hardy, no disrespect to Veronica Hardy, maybe that's a level too low for Miranda Maverick. You're going to want someone in and around the Andrea Lee, sort of slightly older, whatever. But I'd have no problem with the Veronica Hardy fight if they wanted to do that. No problem.
For sure. Overall, we said that we would talk about this card, how you felt about it. Maybe we'll even give it a rating here, Harry, to round us up for the balance breakdown this week. We've gone 90 minutes. Big cards deserve this amount of time, though. I do appreciate your time staying up this late, Harry. Give us your overall thoughts on the card. Give us your rating for the card as well before we finish up for tonight.
So I think my rating is going to be a 7.4. I thought main event, electric. Co-main event was really, really good. But again, we're seeing a Bobby Knuckles that's just slightly diminished from the powers that maybe we'd like to see him on. Slightly disappointed with Ian Machado, Garry. But then we got to see Merab and Henry, just unbelievable fight. Fantastic stuff. Fluffy Hernandez looks good. Lemos Dern was a great fight. Two big meaty men knocked each other down. Rinya Nakamura, it was great to see. Really, really high level prospect. And now, especially now that we know that he hurt his hand, I think we're even more impressed with that performance. Zhang Ribeiro did exactly what it said in the tin. Barlow, Quinlan, again, we got to see nice prospect in Barlow, nice prospect in Oban Elliott. And then we got to round it out with Miranda Maverick, who is starting to make good on her prospect status. So all in all, I thought it was a good card. Couple of the fights on the main card didn't deliver as we would expect them to have delivered at their absolute peak, but these things happen in MMA. But overall, I enjoyed the card. It was a fun watch. Very, very happy in equal parts for Ilia Topuria as I am sad for Alexander Volkanovski. But yeah, good card.
At BJJ_Harry Powell, at O'Neill MMA is where you find us on social media. Thanks for listening in. Like I said at the start, like button, subscribe button. Head on over there and check out the Severe Spotlight this week as well. A really, really excellent piece on that main event between Ilia Topuria and Alex Volkanovski. We'll see you later on in the week for the severe setup. Thanks for listening.